The following program is a PodcastOne.com production.
From Hollywood, California, by way of the Broken Skull Ranch, this is the Steve Austin Show.
Give me a hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Now, here's Steve Austin.
While I was going over an early Christmas dinner, I jotted down just some pages of notes. I thought we'd kind of go over those, answer some questions, and fit in what we have time to fit in. With that being said, let's start off with something current that I know you wanted to promote and talk about on the show. The fact that you and Tom Pritchard started a wrestling school over there in the Knoxville area. Tell me about this and what made you decide, after all of your years in the business, and I want to get to your training with Dean Malenko, who trained you to break into business. Why a wrestling school, Glenn? You're busy being the mayor of Knox County.
Tom Pritchard is one of the top trainers in the entire world. I mean, he's just awesome. And it's one of those things where people would always come up to me and, how do I get into the wrestling business? Well, eventually you're going to have to go, if you want to get WWE, you're going to have to go to the Performance Center. You have to go to Orlando. But, Booker's got a great school. Booker T has a great school in Houston. Lance Storm, of course, has a wonderful place up in Calgary. Well, those are in Houston and Calgary. And I thought to myself, Tom Pritchard is just sitting here in Knoxville. And again, he's one of the very best in the world. And I'm telling people, and again, those are guys that I trust. There's some others around, but, specifically those two guys. I'm telling people to go 1,000 miles. Why don't we just do it here? And I think it's going to be a great partnership. Tom's trained people like Kurt Angle and trained The Rock, all these different superstars. Really, for me at this point, it's about this business has been very good to me. Sometimes I worry about the pipeline of talent, so I'm sure you do as well. And anything I can do to help people get into it the right way, because a lot of people aren't going to take you down the right path, and anything I can do to help folks get into it the right way, I think it's beneficial for all of us. And, that's really the reason why. I mean, for me, I thought it was really just a waste of Tom's talents not to be doing this. And that was the big motivator for me, really.
And I agree, man. I think Tom is one of the top trainers that there is. He took me under his wing when he didn't have to in my USWA days when I was starving to death and dropped a lot of knowledge on me. So I agree with you that. And yes, Booker T, Lance Storm. I would throw Al Snow in there as well just because.
Al's another great one.
Yeah, so there's a couple. And like you said, there in your area, there's a need for that. What are you guys going to be doing different than the Performance Center, say NXT down there in Orlando? Or will it kind of be the same program? Because, man, you've been with WWE since give or take around 95.
Well, probably be a lot, probably be some of the same stuff to some extent. A lot of it, too, is when you're looking at different schools, you really have to consider how can these folks help me. It's not only about what you're going to learn there, but how can they help you advance. And I think, of course, that Tom and I can do that as well. Eventually, again, anyone that wants to go to WWE at this point, that's really the path to go through the Performance Center. So in many ways, I see this as the first step for anyone who would want to get into WWE, to do that. And then, of course, you have people who just want to get into the wrestling business, which is great, too. So one nice thing about all the stuff that's going on nowadays on the independent scene is it's really revitalized that independent wrestling. And, that's another pathway to go. But either one, really what we're hoping to do is give folks that are starting out, give them the basics, and that includes, of course, in-ring performance, promos, and that sort of stuff. And really nowadays, promoting yourself on social media, that's as important as anything, and making a name for yourself on social media. And from there, if you have people that are a little more advanced, helping them polish off so that they can take that next step.
Hey, man, you went to college at Northeast Missouri State, and you got a BA in English Literature. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
What were you planning on doing with that degree? Because you jumped right into business of pro wrestling. And I applaud you for getting a college degree.
I was thinking about teaching. And what happened with me, I'd always been a fan of wrestling, ever since I was a little kid. Sort of fell off in high school. We lived out in the country. We didn't have cable TV. It's one of those things, if the wind was blowing right on a Saturday night, I could watch all-star wrestling out of Kansas City, catch people like Bulldog Bob Brown and Ray Candy, and every once in a while Harley Race. But that was really about it. I got to high school and go to my friend's house and we watch, get to watch NWA and WWF at the time. But I wanted to play basketball. I went to college on a basketball scholarship, and I did lift weights in high school. So was a skinny kid when I graduated. Started lifting weights between my senior year of high school, my first year of college, and I put on 30 pounds, I think, over the summer. And I just kept on putting on weight. So by the time I was a senior in college, I went up and down the basketball court. I weighed 290 pounds.
Jesus.
And the football coach comes to me like, what are you doing? What are you doing, man? You need to play for me. It's a Division II school. It's a small school. I still had some eligibility left that I could play football. And, so I started playing football, man. I was not to toot my own horn, but I was a great football player because I had all those years of playing basketball. So I had the athleticism. I had the strength and the size and everything. I'm getting looks from NFL teams. I thought I was going to play in the NFL, and then I blew my knee out. First practice of game week. That pretty much ended my football career. And I was thinking, well, what else could I do? I'd always been a fan of wrestling. And Hogan was super hot, and I thought that I'd give that a try. And, I thought I could be good at it. And that's how I got into the world of professional wrestling.
Dude, what is your shoot height and weight?
I'm 6'8", and I weigh, right now I weigh about 290, 295. The heaviest I've ever been is about 320.
You've always pretty much maintained your physique the entire time I've known you. I mean, and I've never really crossed paths with you in the gym because we traveled in different circles, and I was kind of running with the drinking crowd. I trained here and there, but you were obviously a little bit more serious about it than I was. What does your training consist of? I know how football players train, but once you got into the business, was it basic bodybuilding style training? Because you've always had that impressive physique that, as we'll go through a couple of gimmicks, but that really, made you the perfect person to be the monster Kane.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks. But I actually always, until my body revolted, I always followed I always did football training, man. My strength coach in college was a world-class powerlifter. He was actually, I believe, the first guy to break Bill Kazmaier's overall total in the bench press, squat, and deadlift at 2,400 pounds. So he was a monster. And we just concentrated always. It was squat, deadlift, and bench, and my motto was go heavy or go home. And I did that for years and years and years and years and years. And then, like I said, my body just started saying, I can't do that anymore. So I backed off the heavy stuff. I still lift weights. I do a lot more cardio now. But yeah, for years, man, that's, if I figured out I was going to go to the gym, I just lifted as heavy weights as I possibly could.
Who was the guy that you just, you didn't drop his name, but that beat the 2,400 pound total?
It was the guy named John Ware.
Okay, yeah, I'm aware. No pun intended of that guy.
Yeah, that was my strength coach, my position coach in college.
Give me three basic numbers. What you would probably total your best lift: squat, bench, and deadlift.
I was never a great squatter or deadlifter. I was okay. I could squat probably about 600, deadlift about 550. I was a good bencher. My best bench was 525. That was straight, like no bench press suit or anything like that. That was just a raw bench.
Dude, those are great numbers.
Yeah. Especially, the thing about it is being so tall, it's not like I have a power lifter body or anything like that, So yeah, but again, that was just the result. I mean, that's what we did, all the time. That's how we trained.
So you've got this college degree. All of a sudden, you've been watching wrestling your entire life. How in the world did you hook up with Dean Malenko to train you in the business of pro wrestling? Because Dean Malenko is, first of all, I consider him, an awesome talent, true scientific wrestler, great technician, and you're a big guy, more of a brawler. You're not really going to wrestle people on the mat. So how'd you hook up with Dean Malenko, and how did this go? Because there's a big difference stylistically here.
Sure. Well, I was working independence around St. Louis, Missouri, and just picking up what I could here or there. And I felt like if I was going to get serious about it, I had to be trained properly. And Dean's father was the great Boris Malenko. Larry Simon is his real name. Gave him a call. He had the Great Malenko's Wrestling Academy in Tampa, Florida. And I ended up relocating from St. Louis to Tampa. Just like all of us, held whatever job that I could, bouncing at bars or, whatever. So I could go to wrestling school. And it wasn't just Dean that was there. It was also Joe Malenko, Dean's brother, who's just tremendous, he worked with Carl Gotch, and lived with Gotch for a while. So, Jody was a tremendous shooter and submission wrestler. And, that was the nice thing about going there is you actually got trained in both styles. And my first real gig in professional wrestling was working for Fujiwara Gumi in Japan in submission style wrestling. I would go over about once a month, and they had their matches were like I guess the old UWF from Japan, I think, where you had guys like Fujiwara, and it was a different style. But this was straight submission wrestling. That was what I did initially through my training at Malenko's, and then I was actually ended up going to Puerto Rico for 9 months, working for Carlos, and then came to Smoky Mountain Wrestling with Cornette. And at the time, Smoky Mountain was really a door into WWF. They had Cornette was working with the Heavenly Bodies, and they were doing stuff on WWF TV with the Rock and Roll Express. And I was fortunate enough to, work with Ricky Robert and some of the other great performers with Cornette.
Okay, you're working over in Japan. You're doing some very interesting type stuff there. And then with the submission game, all of a sudden your big ass goes down to Smoky Mountain. And, I love Jim Cornette. He's one of my favorite managers of all time. He's probably got one of the brightest minds in the history of the business. So all of a sudden, this 6'8", 300-pound guy, shows up down there. What? I'm looking at a list of names. Which one of these names did he drop on you? Was this the Mike Unabomber gimmick?
Yeah, it was just Unabomber. Just Unabomber. Yeah,
you left off the ER because you didn't want to do any gimmick infringement.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that was all Cornette. He just thought it was a cool name.
Well, give me your first impressions of Jim, because as much as I love him, he's out there. creatively, and like I said, I just love the guy to death. But all of a sudden, man, this guy, if he takes you under his wing, some serious learnings could be had there.
The thing I remember the most about Jim was the first time I saw his temper, which is legendary at this point. But I'll preface the story a little bit. I'd been in Puerto Rico, and Dutch Mantell had taken me to Puerto Rico. I owe a lot to Dutch throughout my career.
Me too.
He got me to Puerto Rico. Then he got me a job with Cornette. But in Puerto Rico, Eddie Gilbert was with me as well in Puerto Rico, and we were going to go to Cornette as a tag team. And then what happened was we did one TV taping, which is 3 weeks of TV. And Dutch had left Puerto Rico, so Eddie got the job booking back to Puerto Rico. He went back to Puerto Rico. So that's when Al Snow came down, and I ended up being the tag team with Al Snow. But anyway, Al Snow and George South have a TV match. This is Al's debut on Smoky Mountain Wrestling. So they go out, and Jim told them to have a 10-minute match, do out the high spots, and Al was going to beat George with his finish, like a leg lariat off the top rope or something like that. Well, they go out and they did the handshake spot for like 5 minutes.
Oh no!
Where the heel's going to shake. And Cornette's sitting there watching it, and he's like, "That's the thing about Al. He's a great wrestler, but he's not used for TV and having lots of action in match." So they come back, and Jim tells George now, "Well, it's not exactly what I wanted, guys." So George, this is probably the first time in the history of the business that a babyface actually called out a heel like this. But, he sends George back out and says, Al, no, you can't beat me twice in one night. And they're supposed to do a couple high spots, and then Al just rolls George up or whatever. So they go back out, and they did one high spot and one thing, and then Al rolls George up. And Cornette he was like a volcano. He slowly starts cursing. Everybody's leaving the room, and I'm sitting there like, what is going on here? All of a sudden, his face starts changing all these shades of red, and finally it's just purple. And he's throwing stuff and going off, and I'm like, what in the world is going on, man? And then here come Al and George, and Jimmy just sort of like swallows and looks at him and says, guys, that wasn't exactly what I want, but I'll make it work. And I was like, man, that's what I knew I set to do, a bit of a different world than what I was used to.
You got into the WWF at the time, now WWE, in what, mid-1995?
Yeah, yep.
Okay, now
August of 1995.
Okay, and you also got married in 1995.
Yep, about the same time.
And you are still currently married to your wife from 1995.
Yeah.
Okay, now she's known you. You'd been in the business since 92. Y'all get married in 95. All of a sudden, Little Smoky Mountain, and boom, you're away to the big show. You're going to New York, and that's the big time. So what has been your wife's take on all this, as long as it's lasted? And I didn't even know that you guys sold insurance on the side down there, and now you're married. But what was her take on the business way back in the day when all of a sudden, I mean, because, dude, it's hard to stay married in this business. So what is your wife's take on the business of pro wrestling?
Well, she's just very grounded, and, she never got involved in any of the drama, which I tried to avoid as well. Because that's really, I think, what does it, right, is we all have to remember that we're just people doing a job, at the end of the day. And, a lot of times the guys talk about how hard it is to be on the road, and it is to be with your family, but it's just as hard on your family. And, I've been very fortunate because Crystal is, she's very strong. And like I said, she's just grounded. I mean, she's not afraid to just tell you something's BS, and she understands all that stuff.
Right.
So, she just never bought into any of the things that kind of go along with stuff. I think that, when people start thinking that, I don't know if it's that they're bigger than the business or, that the whatever defines them, that they're a superstar. And Crystal never bought into any of that stuff. That's probably why I never did either, because she wouldn't let me, frankly. It's that's why, and also, I just made a commitment, and, no matter what, that our relationship has always been the most important thing, more than my career, more than anything else. Even though it's hard at times, but it has been.
Hey, man, tell me about your debut, or tell me about the phone call or the meeting in person, because when you started that Isaac Yankem DDS gimmick, I mean, and mister, I've had a bad gimmick or two. I got a phone call from Vince McMahon, and he pitched me the ringmaster, and I had a mortgage, and I had some kids, and I needed a job, so I went up there. But I didn't want to go up there, but I knew I needed to pay my bills and not go bankrupt. You're there before I am, and I remember watching. I'm thinking to myself, man, who is this big ass guy? I mean, because he's got a great look, he's very intimidating, but this gimmick, not so much.
He's a dentist.
Yeah, and this is kind of when, kind of on the back end of those hokey days, because a year or two before this, I remember a guy slipping on banana pills, literally, really slipping on banana pills in finishes. And this is when I was in WCW, and of course, I knew WWF was the big leagues, but when I was watching some of those finishes, I was like, oh man, I would be embarrassed to be doing that. So real gimmick heavy here. And so you go in as Isaac Yankem, and all of a sudden, I mean, you're in the big leagues. This is a great opportunity. But tell me what you were thinking when they pitched you that, or tell me it was your idea.
It wasn't my idea. No, man, I was, another guy that I owe a lot to is, of course, Jim Ross. And, Jim Ross was on hiatus from WWE, but going back, but he was working as Cornette's commentary, announcer. I mean, within a month or two, of course, I'm a big guy, so JR, likes big guys, and immediately he got me a trial with New York, with WWE. So I was super excited, man. Had my tryout match with Reno Riggins, and of course Reno, great worker, made me, fantastic. And within literally a couple of days, Cornette talks to me, and he's like, man, they're going to sign you. They want you and everything. So I'm like, awesome. This is exactly what I want to do. So I get a call, and they want me to come and meet with Vince, and time J.J. Dillon was head of talent relations. So I fly from McGee Tyson Airport in Knoxville, Tennessee, fly up to LaGuardia. And I'm a country boy. I had never been in a limousine before. So I'm thinking to myself, I have made it. I am a WWE superstar. It don't get no better than this. Take me to the office there in Stamford, Connecticut. I'm sitting in the room talking with JJ. Vince walks in. We hear all this stuff about Vince, like he's an evil genius, and he's going to get in your mind and, figure out what you're thinking, and all these stories that you hear about Vince. So we're sitting there. There's some small talk, of course. Everything's going well. And then Vince asked me, he's like, Glenn, have you ever been afraid to go to the dentist? And I think this is one of these things where he's like, I'm going through a personality test or something. So, right? So I'm like, well, no, sir. And he's like, I've always had this idea for a wrestling dentist. Isaac Yankum. I yank him. And then he starts doing the Vince laugh, right? And I'm, yeah, exactly. And I'm looking at it, man, this individual in this business that I am trying to, like you said, to break into the big leagues. And I'm sitting at him and I just have, I guess, a blank face. I'm not trying not to react. And then he looks at me like, think you'll be great for it. And then he walks out. And I'm sitting there, man, and I went from like on top of the world to feeling like the world had just fallen on top of me. Because I'm like, a wrestling dentist? And then how am I going to pull this off? And I get home, man, I talked to Cornette, and I'm like, man, I just don't know about this whole dentist thing. He's like, oh, it'll be fine. That's just his first thought. They'll come up with something cool. About 2 months later, I talked with Cornette, and by this time he's working with creative in WWE. He's like, here, the good news is you're going to be coming up real soon. The bad news is it's the dentist. And I'm just like, oh, man. But I'm just like you, it's what was I going to do? I mean, if I had, if I wanted to advance my career, basically I had to take the shot, and it just got worse. I mean, I had to put paint on my teeth to make my teeth look decayed. And everybody else had this cool music. I got a dentist drill. And I'm just like, golly, man. And frankly, I wasn't ready to do it. Here I am watching guys on TV like The Undertaker. Now I'm in the ring with them, and business was a little different back then too, Undertaker's one of the few guys that would, that sort of took me under his wing and helped me along. A lot of the other guys, it was all about them. It wasn't the best of experiences, let me put it that way. And now they've made an action figure of it. I can't even forget about it.
Well, it's interesting that Undertaker would take you under his wing back then, and because, I mean, that was, foreshadowing a year or two, you were about to become his brother. But before we get to the Undertaker, I know you got a chance to work several times with Bret the Hitman Hart. What were your thoughts on working with him and him as a person? Because he did a lot for my career. How did you find him in the ring?
Well, the thing about the Isaac Yankum character was, despite the fact that I never considered it a success, it was a success, and it got my foot in the door. And, and showed Vince I had a work ethic. I wanted to do this. It just wasn't the character for me. The gimmick just wasn't something that I felt comfortable doing. But I had the opportunity of working with people like Bret Hart, legitimately one of the best of all time.
Yeah.
In fact, my first match was at SummerSlam, and it was against Bret. We were the semi-main event at SummerSlam, and it doesn't get any bigger than that, frankly. That was a huge deal. And Bret's always been good to me. Luckily, I think later I had much more success with the Kane character. I think looking back on that now, I mean, gosh, the thing is that I wish I'd been doing Kane when Bret Hart was still WWE. I think we'd have had some killer matches and done some really great things. But yeah, he was always great to me, and working with him was a tremendous learning experience. That's for sure.
I would say the same thing. He's such a great storyteller. Before you cashed in or finished that gimmick, did you not go to Kuwait and South Africa?
Yeah.
Those two tours.
Yeah.
And were you there as Isaac Yankum?
Yes.
And if you remember, dude, those were two pretty crazy trips. And I don't think you've ever been a drinker. But when we went to Kuwait, couldn't have any alcohol. A lot of the boys kayfabe alcohol over there. And then when we went to South Africa, it was Rib City. Everybody was wearing ribs. I think everybody was playing ribs on each other. I think one time I was working with Shawn Michaels, and I taped up my arms with pink tape like the Ultimate Warrior would have worn, and my arms weren't near the size of his, but there was just a bunch of ribs going on. Do you remember those two trips? Anything stand out?
I do. I do. And did we go to Kuwait more than once?
I can only remember being there one time.
Yeah, man, I can't remember. I remember, like, in Kuwait, the royal family, I guess, had set up and we're staying in this hotel on the beach, and the royal family had actually set up, like, weights out on the beach or something like that for us to work out with. And then, of course, you had, the matches. I remember you, that's when you did a splash off the top rope, But you jumped off the top rope, landed on your feet, and did a buddy hop into like the least impactful splash of all time. And that's so the match just went. And then remember the big test of strength with Taker?
Yeah.
You know, yeah. They had everybody's in the ring with Taker, and everybody joins hands. It's like a battle royal or something like that. You know, and yeah.
It was like an 8-man test of strength, and you had to break the chain to jump in. And it was the most ridiculous thing in the history of the business.
It was awful.
And I don't remember really going back because I believe that was one of the times we were trying to kill the territory. I say that in jest.
And then I remember South Africa, man, that we got to stay at that Sun City Resort, and that was pretty awesome, actually. I remember going to the water park there, and also to this golf course, and it was me and Justin
Aldo Montoya.
Yeah, Aldo Montoya. I remember he and I are out playing golf, and I don't play golf. You know, it was awful. But anyway, we're out playing golf, and you would like hit it into the bunker, except the bunker was like this pit filled with literally alligators. You know, and that was everywhere throughout the course.
I'll never forget we were on a safari in South Africa. I think everybody went, or if you signed up for it, you went. So anyway, I signed up for it, and we're out there, and we're driving around. We're seeing all these cool animals, and then we stop at a water hole. And, you know, I'm Mr. South Texas hunter. I know everything there is, so I'm out there walking around the water hole, checking everything out, and the guy comes up to me, and he goes, you might not want to be right there by the water hole. And so, you know, me knowing everything, said, dude, what's up? Why? He goes, well, you know, it's feeding time, and a lot of times when these animals come to get a drink at the water hole, the lions or the alligators or the crocodiles will jump on them. And I was like, that's a good reason to get away from the water hole. Hey, man, I want to shift your attention to the curtain call in Madison Square Garden. Were you on that card?
I was not, actually.
This was before kayfabe had really been broken on a scale like that. Sure, there had been the exposés and all the other stuff, but no one had ever, you know, hugged each other inside the squared circle, much less a cage. And Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, those guys were going down south. Shawn Michaels and Triple H would stay. And in 1996, you became the fake Diesel. And then Rick Bogner became the fake Razor. So when they pull you into the room, and Big Ted has written this guaranteed, and that was an interesting dynamic that those guys had went down south because that was the first time, in theory, Mark Merrow might have been first. There was actually guaranteed money, big guaranteed money in the business of pro wrestling. So all of a sudden, you've been Isaac Yankem. You know, that's not a great gimmick, but you do have your foot in the door. You're in a good place. And all of a sudden, they want you to be the fake Diesel. And I'll say, dude, you pulled it off as well as could be done. It was awesome, actually. But you were the fake Diesel. How did you feel about that?
Ironically, I think Jerry Briscoe told me while we were in either South Africa or Kuwait, and I can't remember which one it was. Anyway, he said that Vince wanted to talk to me when I got home. We came home from overseas, and Vince explained to me what they want to do. And I'm going to be the fake Diesel. Now, the concept of the storyline was excellent, actually, because what had happened was, you know, JR was turned heel, and you know, he was going to prove that he was actually the creative mind behind WWF success, and he could replicate it with anybody. And it was going to be me and the fake Razor. The problem is JR is not really a heel character. People like him, and that didn't work very well. And, the whole thing was another thing was, you know, a lot of times I think when we're looking at storylines, you know, and you have the concept is great, but it just doesn't work in reality because so much of what we do is based on does the audience accept that? And they didn't really accept this whole thing. I mean, no matter what, you know, it's still the fake Diesel and the fake Razor. At least I wasn't a dentist anymore.
The Steve Austin Show. The Steve Austin Show.
You own or rent your home? Sure you do. And I bet it can be hard work. You know what's easy? Bundling policies with Geico. Geico makes it easy to bundle your homeowners or renters insurance along with your auto policy. It's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around your home. Go to Geico.com, get a quote, and see how much you could save. It's Geico easy. Visit Geico.com today. That's Geico.com.
This is the Steve Austin Show.
heading into give or take 97, 98, all of a sudden you are bestowed upon the gimmick of Kane. So what was that conversation like? Who came up with the idea of Kane creatively?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly who it was because so much of everything that we do is a collaborative effort, right? The story, as I understand it, is this. This is right after the Kuwait trip that Big Van Vader was arrested. He was detained in Kuwait, and Undertaker needed an opponent. And they're panicking because who's Mark going to work with at the next pay-per-view or whatever it was. And so they come up with this idea of Kane, which was it wasn't even called Kane yet. It was called Inferno, was the character's original name. And but basically they were going to hotshot it, and they were going to use me because they could put physically I matched Mark's size. Put me under the hood. No one thought about the other characters. But then Vince really liked the idea. The story's great, right? You have these two brothers that are almost mythical creatures. The other one tries to kill him in the fire, and all this backstory they had going into that, right? And then that's where they came up with the character Kane. I think Bruce Pritchard always loved the name Kane. In fact, he has a son named Kane. But Bruce and I were talking, and I pitched that too. I was like, Inferno sounds like a cartoon name.
Yeah.
Kane, Kane and Abel and all that stuff. And then when Taker was first debuted at Survivor Series in '91, I think, he was Kane the Undertaker. And he was Kane the Undertaker for like 2 weeks, and then they dropped the Kane part and just made him the Undertaker.
Right.
But then you have the backstory was Taker's original name, was that an homage to his brother and all this stuff, and of course I'm thrilled because I'm going to get to work with Undertaker.
Oh yeah, man, you're stepping in one of the best spots ever. And here's the thing, going back to what you were saying,
it did not get any better than that, right?
I consider the Undertaker to probably be the greatest character ever created in the history of the wrestling business. I love Ric Flair, the Hulk Hogan's, the Macho Man's, Stone Cold or whatever, and Kane as well. But the Undertaker, one of the heaviest duty gimmicks of all time, and there's probably no one better than Mark to pull it off. How was he on signing off on this? And it's different. It's for guys of your size, Mark's size, because, hey man, on one hand, it's great. You're probably not going to take as many bumps as everybody else. But on the other hand, man, you've got to have a dancing partner that can match your physicality to really draw money. And so I'm sure that, for the Undertaker, finally I get a chance to work with a guy my size so we can have 50-50 matches, and he doesn't have to sell up right all the time. And he'll sell for anybody, but you got to stay on top of Undertaker's ass. So anyway, tell me about the working relationship, because there's got to be a lot of trust in this for you to play his brother, and the chemistry you guys had in the ring was tremendous. But how did that relationship? I know he'd already taken you under his wing, but then all of a sudden you guys have got to become pretty close because you're dancing together damn near every night of the week and drawing big money. Yep.
Well, again, going back to what Dutch Mantell told me, at the time I was working for Lawler in USWA. I was still on a contract with WWF, but they weren't doing anything with me, and so they farmed me out to Lawler. And I'm talking with Dutch about it, and Dutch is like, well, if it's going to be successful because Mark is going to make it successful, right? And that's exactly what happened. I mean, he'd always been a huge advocate of mine. In fact, my first match with Undertaker was actually in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. He and Shawn Michaels came down and did a show, I think it was called Super Brawl, for Cornette. And as you say, he saw a big guy that, I think that he felt that he could draw money with. The thing about being a big guy in our business is, again, you don't have to take as many bumps and all that, but anything that you do has to look extremely believable because everything is exaggerated when you're bigger. I mean, people just expect that, right? So that's sort of the drawback of it. And yes, you have to know how to be vulnerable. You have to know how to sell in the right way or to register in the right way and all those things. But I was very fortunate because Mark was all about the whole thing, and just tremendously helpful. In fact, it was one of those things where as it got to rolling, you'd have egos that play every once in a while, right? And someone would maybe not want to do something that they needed to do. And basically I would tell them, look, you can either do this or we can talk to Taker about it. And inevitably they did what they were, they did what I was asking them to do. It was also, Mark understood too, that success in this business, when you're in the ring, it is like a dance. It takes two people, to succeed. And, he was always all about it. And, as much as anything, the plate or the table was set for me, dude. I'm going to go in there with the Undertaker. Paul Bearer had been talking about Kane for months before Kane ever came out. All this stuff that was just set up that Kane was going to be successful. And I was just fortunate enough to be, the guy that was in that position. And then to go out there with, Taker, first match in Hell in a Cell, Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels, which had never happened before. I'm involved with that. It was just one of those things, man. I couldn't have written a better story than that.
I know you'd already been working on the submission stuff. You've been going over to Japan. So obviously, like you were just saying, as far as selling, registering, there's different levels. But then all of a sudden, when you turn into Kane and you're working with the Undertaker, did he pull you aside? Because even though you were a big guy then, you weren't really a big guy with stroke. Now you're working with a made guy who's the Undertaker, and there's been probably no one that's been more professional or cool than that guy, and a respected guy in the locker room because of his cool and calmness and just the way he thinks about the business, his whole approach. Did he just say, "Okay, dude, you've been doing great, but now you're my brother. You're working with me." There's that rub there, which you've got to hold up your end of that, or what you're going to be doing with Mark is not going to matter. Did he have that conversation to you as far as selling and how to conduct business with smaller guys?
We'd already had that conversation about 2 years ago when I was Isaac Jacobs, and that's a lot of the reason that when I got the fake Diesel character, it was a lot more successful because I realized what I had to do. And it was, because Mark had already had a conversation. But yes, after, the Kane deal, it wasn't like he, ever sat down and said it, but, I understood. And a lot of times, again, I'd mess something up and feel bad about it. The reason I felt bad about it is I let him down, and he had invested so much into the character. My first night, I dropped him. I tombstone pile drive the Undertaker. That never happens. That made me right off the bat, and anything that I would do to mess that up hurt him because he had done that for me. But I would go to him every once in a while and say, "Hey, so-and-so wants to do this." And it was just counseling that, well, he'd tell me, do whatever you want to do, but I wouldn't do that if I was in your spot.
Right.
Yeah. So, that was awesome for me. But yeah, and then Shawn, I remember, right before we did the deal at, Royal Rumble, I guess, 98, Taker and Shawn had a casket match, and we had actually teased unification of Kane and The Undertaker right before that, leading into that casket match.
As you had morphed into Kane and started doing business at a high level, how did your working relationship with Vince McMahon change? Because obviously, I always tell people this, and from your first meeting in there, you go in there, you meet the guy, you've heard all the stories. He's a third-generation promoter. He's an evil genius. He can take someone with some problems, spin them around, and they think they've got all the problems solved, and they walk out and think, "Hey, man, I didn't really get a chance to settle what I wanted to settle." He's just a master of psychology. And so I learned from my ringmaster days to when I turned into Stone Cold, and then as I started getting hot, my relationship with the man became much closer, not only on a professional level, but a personal level. And I've always told people I've learned more from working from Vince McMahon than I did in 5 years of college. So how did your relationship grow with Vince? Because he can be a very intimidating figure.
Well, I feel the same way that you just said. It's the same for me. A lot of what I've done, even outside of WWE and outside of wrestling, and some success that I've had in other areas is because things that I've learned from him just by, watching how he does things and approaches business. The thing about Vince is you really have to be at that level, okay? And you have to act like you were at that level with him, and to get him, I think he always values people's input, but you have to be confident, I guess. And like with the Isaac Gagin character, I wasn't, I was still, but I've learned with Vince, the more that I'm confident about what I'm talking about, or more that I want to feel strongly about something, the more he respects my opinion. That's a good spot to be in. He does listen to his talent. A lot of times, like you said, what happens is you walk in and, you think you accomplished something, you walk out and you're like, well, I just came out and I'm doing the same thing I didn't want to do when I went in, Yeah, I mean, he's the master of doing that. But, a lot of times I have been able to, be like, hey, this is why this is not a good idea, or this is why this is a good idea. And he does end up listening to you, because he trusts you, and especially the longer you've been there. He realizes, especially the guy like me, he realizes I'm not in there just for me. I'm in there because I maybe have a different perspective than what he does, but it's still the best interest of his company. I'm not in there just trying to do something for myself. But it does change over time, because you work with someone for long enough. The other thing about Vince is, man, he's super loyal. If you're loyal to him, he's going to be loyal to you.
He's a businessman like anybody. He wants everybody to get over. Yeah. But the more serious you take the business, the more you're putting into it. The more that you can, and the higher up you are, and the longer you're there, the more you can develop that relationship. But in my opinion, Vince does not like pushovers. He likes a challenge. Now, does he want a diva, or does he want someone to buck the promotion every time? No, that's not what he wants. But he does something. He enjoys people to challenge him, and he enjoys challenging people because he always says, Steve, I give people here opportunities, and that's the truth. And so that being said, as many yes men as he's had and surrounded him for a long time, he likes the guys who will say, well, hey, what about this? And the higher level of the business is, the more serious it is. And that's serious money, and that's just business. I want to take you to a time, this is just give or take some time, you were running real hot as Kane, and you still had that mystique. I don't think the mask could come off. Oh, well, before I get to this, let me ask you, what was it like coming from the other gimmicks, going into the Kane gimmick with the mask, and that red and black outfit was total intimidation? How did that change how you felt when you worked the crowd or performed? Because, man, this was just, to me, it was on the same, well, let's go back to when Undertaker debuted at Survivor Series, whatever year it was. When it showed the crowd, that camera panned the crowd, there were kids that were literally scared to death. I think he dropped Snuka right on his head, pile drived him. It was a complete work. Snuka was okay, but that gimmick scared people. And Taker pulled it off like a charm. So all of a sudden, you've had these other gimmicks. Now you have this power persona, this burnt guy, Undertaker's brother. How did that make you feel? Did it change your energy when you went out there?
I mean, absolutely. Because, not only am I in a great spot, like you said, I have this awesome gimmick now. And people bought into it. I mean, from the very beginning. And, it wasn't one of those things where you have even this baby face or heel thing. It was just cool, right? And, it was awesome. And it did change my energy. It changed my outlook as a performer. Because, you always have that part of you that kind of has to buy into things to be able to pull it off, right?
Yeah.
And I was able to buy into this, man.
The Steve Austin Show. The Steve Austin Show.
You own or rent your home? Sure you do. And I bet it can be hard work. You know what's easy? Bundling policies with Geico. Geico makes it easy to bundle your homeowners or renters insurance along with your auto policy. It's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around your home. Go to geico.com, get a quote, and see how much you could save. It's Geico easy. Visit geico.com today. That's geico.com. And one of my favorite angles that I got a chance to work, we were in Austin, Texas at the Frank Irwin Center. and we had started doing business. And chronologically, I'll get things, out of order, but we're getting back into this podcast anyway. So I'm out there cutting a promo, and we're going to have a first blood match. And you come out there, and after I've been talking trash, and you come out on the stage, you put your hands up in the air or whatever, put them down, and man, from the ceiling, I guess about 100 gallons of red syrup coated my ass, and I wore a white shirt on purpose because I knew what was going to happen. And I'm standing there, and I'm just a bloody mess of blood, of syrup, candy syrup, and the crowd can't believe what they've just seen. And man, you put this little gimmick thing to your voice, and you said something like, "Austin, next Sunday, the blood will be yours." Do you remember that night? Because that was one of my favorite angles that I ever shot.
Absolutely. Because what I said was, if I didn't beat you, I was gonna set myself on fire.
Yep.
And then that whole thing, and I mean that was just the great stuff, right? I mean, we were doing really edgy, really cool stuff, and that was like straight out of the movie Carrie. With when she gets soaked with the pig blood and all that. And it was the same thing, except it was live on live TV, and it was awesome, man. And I remember too. I mean, just the whole thing, and we had Taker intertwined with that, and Mankind intertwined with that, and of course Paul Bearer. That was that's some of the most fun stuff I've ever done.
And the thing about it was, before we got into that first blood match, I guess I had been working with Mick Foley. I remember we headlined the Houston Summit. There was about 18,000 people there. There was, man, everywhere we went, every single night of the week was sold out. I was working with Mick Foley. This is one of the few times my mother and my father came to a match to see me wrestle. They just weren't really into the wrestling thing, but they always supported me, whatever, I did. And when I came out of the ring with Mick, I had the chills. I couldn't stop shaking. And hell, I had a staph infection in my right arm, so they take me to Herman Hospital, and basically I'm laying in hospital for 3.5 days getting antibiotics. And the next time I work, that's with you in the first blood match. There's a problem. I mean, because I'm looking forward to working with you, but when I'm working with a guy who's 6'8", built is 7 foot and 300 pounds, and who wears a mask, it's going to be hard for me to bust this guy open. So I'm going to say, okay, work the back of his head, do something, but here's the problem. We were the main event. I always loved to be the main event. It just happens to be in the semi-main was two cats named Mick Foley and The Undertaker in a Hell in a Cell match. And those guys absolutely ripped the roof off the building, not only the building, but the history of the business. That was one of the greatest, craziest matches of all time, and completely stole the show. And so they go out there, all this physicality, all those bumps, all the thumbtacks, everything. And then you and me go out there for our first blood match. And dude, we worked our asses off. We tried real hard. The crowd got into the match, but after what they had seen, it's sometimes it's just one of those nights at the office where you can't top that semi-main or whatever was in front of you. Do you remember how hard that night was, or what was your take on it? Because you might have been like a kid in a candy store. I thought it was really, really hard.
I always tell Mick he has tremendous heat with me because I won my first world championship that night, but all anybody remembers is him flying off a cage twice. And I'm like, I won my first world championship. I'll never forget, man, I'm standing back at the monitor. And this was before we had, the big, huge, nice field position we have now. Basically, you have Vince is sitting there across the table with monitor and Briscoe, sitting at a monitor calling times. So Mick goes off the cage the first time, and everybody's like, good Lord, he's gonna kill himself. And then he goes through the cage, which, of course, that's another story. But anyhow, man, Vince looks at me, okay? I'm still kind of new in the business. I mean, I've only been in for a few years. And I'm going to go out and work with you. And, you're the hottest thing going. And Mick is supposed to come out at the end of the match. Taker's supposed to come out, and the deal was, Taker swings the chair, Mick, and think misses, hits you or whatever happened. But in any case, so they're supposed to come back out. And Vince looks at me and he goes, if he can't make it back out there, you're going to have to figure out what to do. And I'm like, me? How am I going to figure out what to do? Are you crazy? And yeah, it was hard because no matter what we did, I mean, how do you top all that? And I think we did get them by the end, but still, I mean, it was a hard night for us. I mean, it was a night that redefined our business, because of what Mick had done. But it was a hard night for us. But I'll tell you, man, I won my first world championship that night. But the night that actually stands out in my mind was the next night in Cleveland. When it was you and me again, we have a rematch. You come down to the ring, and you basically, insult me and talk me into a rematch, which Vince is standing there, Mr. Mcmahon, and he doesn't want me to do it. And finally, I agree to it. Man, if you remember, that was the most electric crowd I have ever been in front of in my entire life. I mean, it was Gund Arena, packed to the rafters, and it was just like electric, and that was a truly amazing night. And when people say we only have the championship for one day, I'm like, man, it doesn't matter, because it was the next night. It was losing the championship, which actually stands out to me a lot more than I did when I won it, because that was a phenomenal night. And, everybody was there to see you beat me, to see you win the championship back. And it was just a phenomenal night. So really, I remember the night in Cleveland, which is the night after Pittsburgh, much more clearly than I do the Pittsburgh night.
Dude, I just remember that being a hot crowd. It was unbelievable business.
It was unbelievable.
And then I caught some. I think I was on YouTube. I was watching a couple of clips of us, and I guess I got a few of them out of the chronological order. I guess people think, well, why was Kane the world champion for just one night? And it's like, well, hey man, that's just things were so hot. That's just what we did. I didn't really care who was the champion. It was cool for me to have the belt, but whatever. That was a booking decision. I remember going back to that match after Taker and Mick had done all that stuff, and Mick had fell on his head. I know he was concussed. He was lucky he could even walk. And then Taker had obviously been through the ringer as well. And then here he comes down there. I think I hit him with a stunner or something in the match. And then, of course, I roll out of the ring. As I'm rolling back in the ring, it's a timing issue with me and the Taker. And I'm picking up my chair. He swings his chair, which is a perfect shot, double percussion, boom, it's color. I've got a face full of blood. You go over. So the rematch, I win the belt back. But I'd been watching, someone sent me a clip on my email, and this is from Joe Louis Arena when I drove the Zamboni to the ring. Yeah. Vince was about to present you. What title was that? That was the same storyline?
That was the one No, that was a little on further down the line, and it was a match where it was like a triple threat, me, you, and Taker, and it was like in Hamilton.
That's right.
Yeah, and we'd end up like double pinning you, and we were co-champions or something like that, something strange. And sure enough, Vince is about to present us with the belt. Here you come rolling out in the Zamboni machine, hit the ring, the whole ring moves, and you jump over the top rope and do the Fez press onto Vince. It was just awesome, dude. It was great.
My question is, I had to rewatch that, and as I'm rewatching it, because I've forgotten so much of my career, it's been a long time, and I said, hey, wait a minute, there's Kane in the ring. And so, I put it out of order, but so my question, everybody's like, why didn't Kane attack Austin? Why didn't Kane attack Austin? Well, it wasn't in the storyline. But what are you thinking? Because sometimes creatively, they have a way to make you disappear. And I've disappeared plenty of times myself when the spotlight wasn't on me. You just walk up the ramp and they don't shoot you because you walk out of frame.
I think what happened was there were just so many people in the ring. I don't remember why we didn't jump you, frankly. I think it was because there were just so many people in the ring that security grabbed you and pulled you off or something, but I'm not exactly sure why we did. Plus, everybody likes to see Vince get beat up, so that probably it.
Oh, he had the greatest reactions in the world. Hey, a couple of questions. We're going to wrap up this podcast. Kane, in your illustrious career, and I know you still wrestle occasionally, but what is the worst injury you've ever suffered?
I have been very fortunate. The worst thing I've ever done is broke my hand in the ring. I'd had an injury coming in, hurt my back, a couple times, but nothing that put me out for a long period of time. But and just one of those things, man. I was jumping off the top rope, doing my clothesline off the top. Yep. Devon Dudley was my target, so I was blaming it on Devon, although it wasn't his fault at all, but I still say that he did it. But as I was rolling through, I got my finger stuck in the mat and bent backwards and broke my hand. And that was actually leading into the week before WrestleMania. That was WrestleMania 2000, which was in Anaheim. I broke my hand, got a cast put on it, flew out to Anaheim, did the show in Anaheim, and worked with a broken hand. Then I got to take a couple months off and let that heal. But that was really about the worst thing that's ever happened. I've been very, very lucky.
Do you think the business is harder or easier these days to get in first and just to get over second?
And that's always a mixed bag. Probably easier to get in, frankly, because, everything used to be kayfabe, and, you would literally go to train and people would beat you up. So it was very hard. It was very protected. It was very difficult to get in. Now that's not so much. But now I think it is harder to get over. Fan base is a lot more sophisticated now. Frankly, when I go back and watch stuff that I watched as a kid, it's terrible. But when you're watching it from a technical perspective, it wasn't really good. And now, you have a very sophisticated audience, and a lot of people are extremely critical of everything. So I think that makes it more difficult. On the other hand, you can promote yourself through, social media, which you didn't have the ability to do before. That helps. If you're fortunate enough to get into WWE, it's hard. Because nowadays the guys don't have as much freedom as we used to have, to be able to go out there and just do things on their own. And the reason for that is, it's a TV product, and also a lot of the guys that come up don't have the experience to be able to do that. So they're not given that leash. We always say, well, you have to take a risk and you have to take a chance, but it's just very difficult to do that.
And last question, any advice you would tell someone coming up in the business? They're already in the business, maybe they got a year or two under their belt. General advice that you give somebody?
Well, the Jacobs Richards Wrestling Academy is there as a finishing school if they need that. Certainly can give us a call. But, it's a good plug. On a serious note, who you take on as mentors and who you listen to is extremely important. That can make or break your career. And the thing is, you're always going to be learning. I still learn stuff like all the time. When I'm active in wrestling. But I think the most important thing is just you make sure that you try to find quality people to work with and quality people to learn from. I can't tell you how important that's been for me in my own life. If I hadn't had people like Dutch Mantel, like, Dean Malenko and the folks at his school, and Jim Ross, Jim Cornette, and then so many others throughout my career, Undertaker, I would have never gone anywhere, And I think that's the most important thing, is just building up that network of trusted people that you can listen to and learn from. And, then that'll give you the best chance you possibly have.
I'd agree with that. I'd tell you to watch every match on the card and don't be afraid to experiment with your gimmicks, stretch, push the envelope. Not in a way that we used to have the freedom to back in our days, because you could, but just to not be afraid to change, because what you're starting with might not be what you end up with. But to end the podcast, man, if we ever get a chance to cross paths in person, I'd love to sit down, because we just glossed over a few things on Skype. But I want to ask you a lot more. Last chance to plug anything on the podcast. Let's talk about your school and where people can find you on social media, and good luck with everything else you got. So go ahead.
Yeah, sure. The wrestling school is actually at JPW865 on Twitter. The website is jpwrestlingacademy.com. My personal Twitter is Glen with 2 N's, Jacobs, TN, on Twitter. I've had a great time. Again, this is wrestling business and professional wrestling business. I think it's the greatest business in the world, and it has been just very good to me. And I've had the opportunity to meet so many wonderful people. The best thing, and seriously, the best thing now is when someone comes up to me and just shakes my hand and says, "Thank you for all the years of entertainment." And I can't tell you what that means to me. And I think this is the only business that you get to experience that. So it's a wonderful business, and I'm just glad I've had in my life for so long.
Well, hey, man, it was awesome talking to you on the podcast. It took me 5 years to do it, but next time we do it, it must be in person.
That sounds good, my brother. Thank you.
Glenn, take care, and good luck to you and Tom with the rest of school. I know you guys are going to crank out some great talent, and obviously, probably between the two of you, 60 or 70 years of experience.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it, Steve.
This has been a Podcast One production. Download new episodes of The Steve Austin Show every Tuesday at PodcastOne.com. That's PodcastOne.com.
What's better than courtside seats? Free sports on Pluto TV. Hey sports fans, get all your sports free on Pluto TV. Pluto TV is your home for sports. Watch 24/7 channels of MLB, MLS, MMA, sports news and analysis, plus documentaries, TV shows, and movies, all for free. No signups, no fees, no contracts, ever. Download the free Pluto TV app on any device.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, and welcome to T-Pain's Nappy Boy Radio Podcast, the most fun you'll ever listen to while you're folding your clothes. Now let's get this straight, this is not your average podcast. T-Pain's Nappy Boy Radio is super fun, super crazy. It's pretty much an in-your-face conversation. That's the good thing about us. We don't do interviews, we do conversations. All of my guests, all of my co-hosts, we chill, we drink, we play games, we have the song of the week, we have the creative curse word of the week, as long as you're having fun as our guest. Speaking of guests, each week I'm gonna go through my whole contact list and dive head first into the world of music, gaming, exotic cars, tech, strippers probably, doctors probably strippers that are only stripping so they can pay for tuition to become a doctor. You never know. My wife is a certified bartender. She'll make you a drink while you're here. We'll get you drunk and make you play VR after. It's a lot going on, but that's what it's all about over here at T-Pain's Nappy Boy Radio Podcast. See you soon, baby!
Yo, what's good? It's your boy, Big Brother Jake, a.k.a. Jake Warner, my government name. Check it out. I host a show called the Big Brother Jake Podcast, and I've taken my talents to the biggest and baddest platform on the planet. That's right, baby, PodcastOne. My show is unique as I talk about everything. Life, sports, entertainment, being a single dad juggling several jobs. I'm a hot mess, but it's damn entertaining. Subscribe and review now on Apple Podcasts and listen on PodcastOne or wherever you get your podcasts.